the question is, let f of x equals the square root of 56 minus x and g of x equals x squared minus x. And it says give the domain of f of g using the interval notation. So now we know that there is two functions, right? We have f of x and then we have g of x, and the question is asking us to find, first of all, before we find the domain or anything, let us solve f of g. F of g, this simply means f of g of x, which means the function g of x has to go inside the function of f of x. I hope that makes sense. Now let me just wrap that. If we continue, so we will have f of g of x, which will be f of x squared minus x, and I need to substitute this value in place of that x right there. So I will have a square root of 56 minus that x. So what I'll do, I'll put in the parentheses, so I'm replacing that x with x squared minus x. Now we got that out of the way. We've solved f of g. Okay, so now we need to find the domain, but there is a rule when you try to find the domain of a what do they call it, the radicand, right? The square root is usually called a radicand. So in order for us to solve a radicand or to find the domain of a radicand, what we'll do is, let me just change the color of the pen. What we'll do is we'll leave the radicand. We don't worry about it because now we're just trying to find the domain, right? Because a radicand cannot be less than 0. You cannot have a negative number in the square root. Whatever is in the square root has to be 0 or greater than 0. So what we'll do is, so now we know that we have that idea that we cannot have a number less than 0 inside the radicand, or what we call it, the square root. So what we'll do is we'll just leave the square root and we just bring down the whole the function, but we set aside the square root. We don't worry about the square root now, just don't worry about it. We are just using that to solve f of g, and now we just leave the square root because now we're just focusing only on the domain right now. So we bring down, let me go to the left, so we will have 56 minus x squared minus x greater than or equal to 0. The reason why we have that is because, as I said earlier, you cannot have a negative in the radical. It has to be 0 or above. I hope that makes sense. How I'm explaining stuff. Sorry, my accent is kind of heavy. I'm from Fiji, so I hope you get the idea of where we're going with this function right here. So we have 56 minus x squared minus x is greater than or equal to 0. So let's try and solve this equation itself. So we have, and see if we can remove a negative or positive. So now we have a 56, and then you distribute that, you'll have a negative x squared and then you distribute that guy, the negative and the negative is going to be a positive x greater than or equal to 0. Now by looking at this, we know we have an x squared, and then we have an x, and then we have x squared, we have an x, and then we have just a normal number. So we know that this is a quadratic equation. So let's rearrange this. So I'll begin with a negative x squared, and then a plus x, and then a plus 56 greater than or equal to 0. Okay? Now we got that. So now since we know it's a quadratic equation, so let me just leave a reminder that this is our original equation, which we'll come back to later on for us to find the domain. So what we'll do now, we just, once we reach this point, we can remove the sign. So I can rewrite this as a negative x squared plus x plus 56 is equals to 0. And then I need to remove the negative from in front of the x squared, because I don't want any negative in there. So I'll just divide the whole thing by negative 1, divide by negative 1. So on the other side it will be just a 0. Excuse me. And so a negative will cancel from here. This x will become a negative, and this 56 will become a negative, because any of the positive number divided by negative gives you a negative. So my new equation is going to be x squared minus x minus 56 is equal to 0. Now I just need to factor this. So I know I need to find the product of negative 56, a multiple of negative 56. When I multiply those two numbers, it should give me a negative 56, but when I add them, it should give me a negative 1 in front of the x right there. So let's say usually I start with a number itself, so I'll start with negative 56 multiplied by 1. So negative 56 multiplied by 1 is going to give me a negative 56, but when I add them, it's going to give me a negative 55. So this one doesn't work. And then I'm going to go with negative 1 and 56. So negative 1 multiplied by 56 gives me a negative 56, but when I add them, it doesn't even come close to a negative 1, so that one doesn't work. And then I think of multiples, let's say 7 and 8. 7 multiplied by 8 gives me a positive 56, so I need to make one of these guys a negative. So if I make, let's say, negative 7, and then 8 remains a positive, so negative 7 multiplied by 8 is going to give me a negative 56, right? But if I add them, it's going to give me a positive 1, so that one doesn't work. So what I need to do, let me just change the sign. I make 7 positive, and I make 8 a negative. And if I do that, 7 multiplied by negative 8, it's going to give me a negative 56. But when I add 7 plus the negative 8, it's going to give me a negative 1. So this one works. Okay? And then now we know that our factor is going to be, we have a positive 7, and then we have a negative 8. So which means we'll have an x plus 7, and then we'll have an x minus 8, right? The whole thing equals to 0. Okay? So first thing we did was we found f of g, and then we got that answer right there. That solves that guy right there. And the next thing we do is we need to find the domain. So there's like the next step that we are in right now. Now we have x plus 7 and x minus 8 equals 0. And then when we solve for that, x plus 7 equals 0, x minus 8 equals 0. So x is going to be equal to 8, because negative 8, if you take it to the right, is going to be a positive. So I have x equals 8, and x plus 7, positive 7. If I take it to the right, it's going to be a negative 7. So I have x equals a negative 7. Okay, I hope so far so good. Now this is where it gets very interesting, because there's a lot of steps that we need to go through in order to get into the domain itself. So now what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna clear this section right here, because now we need to prove in order to find the domain whether it's really between negative 7 and 8, or is it less than negative 7, or is it greater than 8. So there are some steps that we're gonna go through. So in order for us to prove this, because now we know that on a number line, if I draw a number line, this is how we do it. So you have negative 7, and then you have 8, right? So now for your domain, you need to find out whether your domain is gonna be less than 7, within 7 and negative 7 and 8, or greater than 8, or it can be the three of them, right? So now let's start with x less than negative 7. Okay, pick a number less than negative 7. So let's say okay, I'm gonna pick negative 10. So I'm gonna pick negative 10 for x less than 7. I'm gonna pick a 0 for x between negative 7 and 8, and I might pick another 10 for x greater than 8. Now I'm gonna prove this. In order for me to prove this, if x is really less than negative 7, I'm gonna plug this number into the original equation, which is this one right here. That's the original equation. Let me write the original equation again. So the original equation was 56 minus x squared minus x greater than or equal to 0. That was the original equation that we had earlier. So I'm gonna plug this 10 in here, plug this 0 in here, and plug this 10 in here to see if it's true or false. Now if I put negative 10, I'm gonna have 56 minus, and then you have a negative 10 squared minus, and then you have a negative 10 greater than or equal to 0, and then you solve for this. 56, so let's see, 56 minus negative 10 squared minus, when I solve for this, I got negative 54 is greater than or equal to 0. Is negative 54 greater and equal to 0? Is it greater than 0? True or no? It's a no, right? So that one doesn't make sense. So which means x less than 7, negative 7 cannot be a domain, right? Now let me clear this guy right here. And let me clear this part right here. So x less than 7 is false. It's not true. Now let's look at between negative 7 and 8. Let me see. So I chose 0. So when I plug the 0 in, so 56 minus 0 squared minus 0 greater than equal to 0. 0 squared is 0, minus 0 is 0, 56 minus 0 is 56, so 56 greater than equal to 0. It's true. So now we know that x, it's greater than negative 7, less than 8. Right? So that is true. Now let's see if 8 is also true. I'm gonna clear this guy right here, and then I already picked a number which was positive 10. I could have picked 15, 20, it doesn't matter what number you can pick, as long as it's any number greater than 8. You can even pick 8.5 or just 9. So I'm gonna put the 10 in the original equation. So 56 minus 10 squared minus 10 greater than equal to 0. So we know that 10 squared is 100. 100 minus 10 is 90. 56 minus 90, it's a negative 34. Is negative 34 greater than equal to 0? No, it's false. So which means x greater than 8, it's false. So the only true value that we found is just between negative 7 and 8. So it's greater than negative 7 and less than 8. So since it's an inequality, like or greater than or equal to sign involved, so we'll have x less than equal to 7, negative 7 is false. X is greater than equal to negative 7, less than equal to 8 is true. And then x greater than equal to 8, it's false. So now we know that our domain is going to be only between negative 7 and 8. Since they are equal to, it's going to be a dark line right here, dark line right here. So all these values is going to be a domain. Now we solved the second part of the question, which is the domain. Now we know that our domain is between negative 7 and a positive 8. Not above, not under, just between those two. Right? Now on the third question, using interval notation. So interval notation is just negative 7, comma, and 8. So that is going to be your answer right there. Because bracket actually means that it's included. Just a parenthesis. If I have negative 7 and then 8, that means what I'm saying is numbers between negative 7 and 8, not including negative 7 and 8. But if it's a square bracket, it means that negative 7 and 8 are included in the domain. And that is your final answer. And I hope it kind of makes sense to you, and I hope it helps. And if you have any more questions, don't hesitate to send me questions, like how you take a screenshot and send it to me, and then I'll just make a video and just send it back to you, and I'll try to explain stuff to the best of my ability. And I hope this helps, and happy studying.